They needed someone to lead the club that was Brisbane, that embodied Brisbane.
The Supercoach statistics are phenomenal. He was averaging a try a game that whole back end of the season.
I think we can say this story was never about talent. It was about the transformation of a team of players into a superstar team. Welcome back to Ahead of the Game Sports Chat, Sports Pairs, Jez, Tuck Sports Takes from bets.com.au. Jez, the NRL season is in the rearview mirror. Pack champs right around the corner. But this episode, we're going to look back at the champions season of the Brisbane Broncos. A season review, kind of, you want to call it that?
Yeah, but it's just, I think it's been an interesting story. So I think that's why we sparked the idea. We don't want to say review because we're not doing, 16, 17 reviews for each team. But I think we're going to look at the wild Bronco ride it was. I think surprised a lot of people. So interesting storylines throughout the whole season, and a shock really to most that they took out the premiership and in emphatic fashion through the finals.
Definitely so. Before we get into it, if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, do it right now. And if you haven't visited bets.com.au for your tipping previews ahead of the NRL or the NRL international games coming up, the Pack Champs, the Rugby League Ashes, also heaps of cricket stuff coming up now on bets.com.au as well. Heaps of stuff over there. Check it out. Racing, basketball.
American sport.
It's all there. But this one, picked out a good heading here, I think. Steel and Stardust. How the Broncos turned pain into a premiership.
Wow.
12 months, Jez, after finishing 12th on the ladder, the Broncos, they're champions of the NRL in 2025. A new coach, new culture, and Reece Walsh, the superstar, who just kind of made it all happen.
Yeah, I think it was make or break for Walsh, really. It sort of felt like this year and, probably next year, still, I think, a molding years for Walsh to see, okay, what are you going to be? He had all the ingredients to be a superstar of the game. And, there were some shaky moments and you see players along the way that show this sort of spark and flair and in the media, like the whole thing, and then just vanish and can't handle it or don't perform. And shit, he really turned some heads this year and I think impressed both of us. We sort of leading into the finals and through certain patches of the Brisbane season, I think you were like, don't know if he's got the goods, got the composure, got the talent right now or the maturity to be the man. And he certainly was the man in the finals and in the grand final as well.
Yeah. We're going to get more into Reece Walsh a little bit later in the show, so stick around for that. Or if you want to listen to him right now, check out the chapters. But we start back at the end, essentially, of the 2024 season. And Kevin Walters forced out of the job, essentially. And there was a lot of news around the departure of Walters, a beloved Brisbane boy, finally in the helm. And that what they were saying for a lot of time, that why Brisbane weren't performing is because they didn't have the Brisbane culture. And they needed someone to lead the club that was Brisbane, that embodied Brisbane. And, enter Kevin Walters in 2021. The team finished 14th. Then 2022, a lot better result, up to 9th, but still no finals. 2023, they are there, second on the ladder. Grand final?
Yeah.
Against the Panthers, right? And they lost in 2023? Yeah. I think so, yeah. And then 2024 was Melbourne.
Perth, they threw away the lead. They were up and Panthers came back. Yeah. Nathan Cleary just busted them to pieces in the second half.
And then 2024, the hangover of not winning a grand final against Penrith, finished 9th again, 10 wins, 12 losses. And Jez, again, back to that off season when there was that talk swirling about Kevin Walters losing his job. How do you reflect on that, and what kind of that meant for Brisbane to say, "All right, Kevin, you're not the guy."
Yeah, it was a massive call, like, and you can obviously see both sides of that story. And obviously now in hindsight, it was the right call, but I think it was Gordon Tallis that come out and said, Kevin Walters deserved to be sort of a part of this celebration of them winning the premiership. And I think in a lot of aspects, fair enough. He took them to a grand final. He certainly turned things around. He brought back the culture, was able to get some big names to, I guess, come to the club. The whole Reynolds trade must have been around there at some stage. When
But
did
Jez,
Reynolds come? 21,
one
like
one grand final, but 3 years where they didn't even make finals.
out. Yeah, like but I still think it's fair. Like he would have done the work. He got them there. It was a disappointing year the year prior, obviously not making it, not being able to back up. But we've seen plenty of clubs do that. But it was definitely the right decision, obviously, because Madge has done it. But we'll see what happens next year. Like, do Brisbane still hang around? Are they still there?
Mm,
You
mm.
would presume so. But yeah, I think it's fair to say that Kevy was definitely a part of it, and tough call, but right call to let him go in the offseason.
So they bring in Michael Maguire, and I guess they would have looked far and wide for a coach. I think there were a little bit of rumblings about Wayne Bennett. There was stuff about possibly Josh Hannay, these kind of young up and coming coaches that
Mm,
hadn't been tested. But the Broncos obviously don't want to test another new coach after having Kevin Walters come in after just one professional coaching career before that. But Michael Maguire had a what do you call it? Not baggage, but a an aura around him, and not always a great one. So he'd been at a few different clubs. He'd taken New South Wales to a series victory, the Kiwis, but he
yeah,
failed as well with the Tigers. He
yeah,
failed.
yeah,
He'd won a comp with South Sydney a few years prior to that. So it was hard to kind of gauge Mike Maguire and say, okay, well, is he a guy that needs to have a quality team under him to be able to get the best out of him? Or is he just too set in his ways where, you can only coach what you got in front of you? And if they're not the right guys, and this club could crash and burn even further.
yeah, yeah. Like, it was definitely a big call because there is a big difference, I think, between, like, his most recent success was in these small camps like New South Wales, the Kiwis. Yes, you can train hard, you can build a culture for a short period of time, but can it be sustainable? And very risky with how bad the Tigers have been and how much of a shambles that was. How much of that was Michael Maguire? How much of that was the front office? That's maybe a little bit more evident now, but I think there was still question marks when he did come in, and if he is the right person, because, like, there's obviously these things about his training style and people not agreeing with that at Wests.
Mm.
But I think when it comes to Brisbane, you're talking about, like, Brisbane culture that Kevin Walters brought. I think Madge, in some way, he, like, what's the right word? But he adorns, I want to say, if that's the right
Embodied.
word, that embodies the Brisbane culture in this sort of what Brisbane were back in the day of grit and grind and hard work, hard yakka that pays off to be a premiership. But you've got to have the right people that have the right mindset about that. And maybe that wasn't there at Wests, where you're coming in with, maybe I want to jump on the Queenslander board, but a lot of Queensland type culture is that sort of, hey, we're never out. We're going to work our asses off and don't ever count us out. And maybe if we do the work, then we'll get the reward. And that's what he brought. And that's also a part of that old school Brisbane culture that they wanted to bring in.
And there was no shortage of noise around the appointment of Madge Maguire and whether the young superstar core of the Broncos would be able to handle it. And some of the players came out in defense of Kevin Walters and said, this is the guy that we want to play for. And that would have created some tension as well between the incoming Mike Maguire uh, and the decision makers at the club, and thinking, okay, well, are we going to be able to instill this coach with his hardline style and get all the players behind it to be able to make a run and do this properly? And then you add to that the media pressure from guys like Gordon Tallis, who, is he's right there in the media. He's everywhere. You can hear him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And other guys around the club that loved Kevin Walters. And they also changed out some of that support staff as well along the way, which were, you know, integral parts of that Brisbane club. Then you have the Reece Walsh thing. Okay, well, is Reece Walsh going to be able to get in line, or is his flair too much under this Maguire structure? And that was something in the preseason that a lot of people weren't sure of whether that would work. And the talk was, okay, maybe this is a pretty big play for the Brisbane Broncos club to do this and make this decision. And it could turn out to be really good, or it could turn out to be really bad. And
Yeah.
obviously, we've seen the result of it for this year. But at that time, I think it was a massive decision for the club.
Yeah, and I just like on that, like I remember at the start of the season, there was something about training, and Reece Walsh was training with his shirt off, and Maguire was like, "You don't do that, mate." Like he got reprimanded, and publicly, like it obviously leaked out to the media that okay, that's not what it's all about. When the media is there, you're dressed and it's a little bit old school. But I think players like Walsh, I think it really goes sort of two ways, doesn't it? It's like if you think about those types of personalities, it's you're either going to revolt and you're going to just destroy things when you're trying to, I get not get disciplined, but get sort of hit in line, or you're going to respect that he had the balls to do that and he's doing it for a reason. And maybe that was the first sign of what was to come for Reece Walsh, of being mature enough, not going out and coming out in the media and sort of saying, oh, what the fuck was that? Like, I think he took it on the chin and got himself in line and then followed exactly sort of what Madge had to say. And maybe that was the beginning of it for Reece Walsh and the turnaround of what he was and to what he became come grand final time.
Yeah. So then we move on to the start of the season, and the Broncos, I've put here Vegas too vulnerable for this next segment. The rise,
Mate,
hype,
you're
and crash.
hitting these headlines, huh?
Oh.
Look at you, Mr. Journalist.
But so they go over to Vegas and they play
Yeah.
the Roosters, who are heavily, I think, one of the favourites for the comp, as they always are, and they demolish them, 50 points to 14. And the headlines are Brisbane are back. Brisbane are they're the favourites now. They're the good team. Look at them go. They're superstars. And then they come back to Australia, play Canberra, and get their asses handed to them, 32 points to 22. How do you kind of see that those two first games of the season, the massive rise, the hype, and then the crash the week after, just weeks after having all of this controversy around the preseason and the training off the back of obviously Mike Maguire being appointed?
Yeah, like it's hard to know what you're ever going to be able to take out of those Vegas games. It's such a different environment for a lot of players. You've got a lot of players that have probably never even been overseas to that extent. So it's hard to sort of know what to pull out of that massive win. And I think coming in the future, like every year, it's just like that's like a one-off. I don't think you can ever pull really anything out of it. And then Canberra, you didn't really know how good Canberra were. So maybe it wasn't so shocking now in hindsight that they did lose to Canberra, because Ricky certainly had those guys in line like all season long. But but really sort of hard to ride that roller coaster of the high and then the low with a new coach and controversy, and you can understand why there's teething problems at the start of the season with a new coach and new systems and new plays. So yeah, like looking at it now, I think you're crazy to sort of ride those highs and lows and just go, okay, this is how it usually plays out when you've got a new coach, and it all makes sense. But you understand obviously why the media is going to ride on that.
And Canberra were tipped, I think, one of the favourites for the wooden spoon. To come out in round two and lose to them in that fashion was difficult. Then they went on to win the next 3 games. So they played
Mm.
the next 3 back home at Suncorp, North Queensland, the Dolphins, and the Tigers. Now, North Queensland, the Dolphins were tipped to be finals contenders
Yeah.
at that point of the season, and they weren't overly convincing victories, but they won by 10 points over North Queensland, 8 points against the Dolphins. Scores are quite low, but they're doing all right. And then they come out and demolish the Tigers. So now back to this again, the hype of like, okay, well,
Yeah.
maybe Brisbane are all right. And, Adam Reynolds and had Ezra Mam come back by that stage? Possibly not.
No, not yet. I think he was out for the first 7 or something, wasn't he?
Right. Yeah. So Ben Hunt playing, Adam Reynolds playing, they're getting their connections going. And the Brisbane are looking all right. 3 games at home and 3 wins. And then, Jez, the crash that sent us kind of reeling over the next kind of period of 7 weeks, they won 1 game.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
we spoke about it on our weekly previews of the Brisbane games that we did on bets.com.au and some of the tipping videos we did here on ahead of the game. It's like Brisbane, they can't win a comp. Look at them. They can't beat, who do they play? They can't beat the Roosters. They can't beat New Zealand. They can't beat South. They can't beat St. George. How are they going to win the comp?
Yeah, I think everybody lost complete faith in them. It's just like, okay, this experiment, Michael Maguire, even Ben Hunt now obviously taking that sort of halves partnership role. Billy Walters sort of coming in and out as well. It just sort of, I think everybody lost hope. It was everybody wrote them off. You weren't at all on Brisbane. You never thought they were going to make the finals. It was all of a sudden, okay, they're a failure. The teams they beat were bottom ranked teams that aren't really going to be there in the end. So I think, just everything was, all hope was lost for Brisbane fans. You were writing them off every game, backing against them. So like they were just extremely, extremely poor on both ends of the field.
It was hard. I remember the one win they had was a massive win against the Bulldogs, 42 points to 18. I think the Bulldogs possibly had some guys out injured there, but still a massive win when you've gone on to lose, as I said, to those other teams, but you're playing against the Bulldogs.
That was it was a come from behind win. I have even in my head that they could have possibly been down 18-0 at the start of that game and then scored 42 unanswered. It was more of still losing all my words. The Bulldogs fell apart.
Right. So maybe it was a premonition of what was to come for the Broncos with these second half comebacks.
Yeah, and the Bulldogs for that matter too, I think.
Yeah, falling away. So
yeah, it could have even been one of the first Lockie Galvin games, to be honest.
Right. So in those 6 losses that they had through that period, they were scoring an average of 14.6 points. So their attack just disappeared. Reece Walsh was out for 5 of those games. So he was out for the Canterbury game, which they won, and then the next 4 games, which they lost. He was out. They were conceding an average of 26 points per game in those losses. They fell down to 11th on the ladder, and they had a points differential, Jez, of 14 points, which we'll get to a little bit later why that's important. But similar to Penrith, I guess, at this stage, Penrith were maybe a little bit earlier in the season last on the ladder and then managed to fight their way back. So after round 11 or round 13, I think this was, they're 11th on the ladder. The media's written them off. I would say a host of NRL competition or competitors have written them off. Tick the win column when you go on to play Brisbane now because they're a shambles. They haven't handled their preseason. They haven't got their combinations working. Injuries are taking their toll, and they can't get it together. And the questions swirling around Michael Maguire, has the guy gone too far again?
Yeah, like understandably there, I think. But it also now, as we say, doing this at the end of the season, how important was Reece Walsh in that? And maybe all this swirl of, okay, Michael Maguire and Walsh maybe not getting along and all of that was completely false, because Walsh is obviously the core of that team, and he was the core of that team in Michael Maguire's eyes. And if you're building around a player, especially in attack, when they're absolutely struggling to score because everything was based around what the number one was doing, and when he was out, it all fell apart.
So I remember you saying something maybe in our grand final show. Reece Walsh had started meeting a new psychologist, sports psychologist
Yeah,
this year.
yeah, yeah.
Right. So,
Cam Munster's psychologist.
mm, so I want to propose this storyline a little bit here. So
Mm,
you have Michael Maguire coming into the club, his hardline stance against a generational superstar in Reece Walsh. Like he knows he's good. He knows he's
mm.
the Broncos. He's going to be a future. You don't call them Hall of Famers. What do you call them in Australia rugby?
Immortals.
Immortal,
Yeah,
possibly. And Michael Maguire, and you said it here earlier about put your shirt on at training, refuses to change his system for individuals, which I
yeah,
think is what happened really with Kevin Walters. He
hundred
was like,
percent.
I need these guys to be their best. And his
Yeah,
approach is, I'll put you up on a pedestal. But maybe
yeah,
here, and Reece Walsh maybe just coincidentally getting this psychologist at the right time, saying, hey, for you to be your best, maybe you need to step in line and let somebody
mm,
direct you in the right way. Become mature and have that journey together with this guy, and he will bring you greatness.
yeah,
And maybe it was the turning point there of like, okay, Reece Walsh is out. He needs to be around the team. He maybe can have another perspective of being in the box with Maguire or being behind the scenes in training, learning these things and learning the thoughts behind it instead of being the product of it out on the field. And that
yeah.
maturity starting to come through there. And then also the relationship with Maguire and maybe that relate like we have no insight, but possibly. And it's like, okay,
No,
well, everyone else is seeing Reece Walsh and Maguire getting along and that relationship developing. Like, oh, okay, well, if he's doing it, we can do it. And maybe that's where, that perfect storm, 6 losses from 7 games, everybody writing them off. Reece Walsh, the superstar, learning his lesson and then moving forward and starting to develop and mature in his game and in his self to then continue for what was then the second half of the season and just an amazing kind of season for the Broncos.
yeah, just like that turnaround from being where they were and losing that many games. It's not difficult to turn those situations around, especially when you're
Not
like
easy, you
the
mean?
Brisbane. What's that?
It's not easy to turn those situations
Not
around.
easy. Yeah, it's not like it's very difficult to turn it around when, especially in Brisbane, arguably the most popular club in the NRL, and you've got all that limelight there. You've got the like generational talent, and but maybe that time away for Reece Walsh was also a period where he got to sort of sit back and see what Madge was doing and get on board with it without having to be sort of in the crux of it. So, but it just like phenomenal way to go. Okay, from being there to then just going on this finals run, and then the adversity of Reynolds also being out and Reece Walsh needing to step up even more. And that's, I think, where we absolutely sort of, I guess, wrote them off and wrote off Reece Walsh, because we're like, he's not ready for that sort of responsibility. And there you go. He took the step. He matured through this period, through this 3-month period, and became the guy.
Well, let's talk about now the rebuild and the rise, the momentum that the Broncos found off the back of that losing period. Madge's system, he didn't change it, and Reece Walsh matured from round 14, Jez. So I think they had a bye after, no, they had a bye and then they lost against Manly. And then they came back, it was a game against the Titans, I think, which initiated for them a run of 10 wins from the next 12 games. Their attack, 36.4 points per game. Their defense, 18.4 points conceded. And these are the games that they won. Obviously, a little bit would have adjusted a little bit for the games they lost, but just an amazing turnaround. But the doubt is still there, Jez. And I think I was one of the biggest doubters because you look at the teams they beat, and of the 10 wins, only 4 of them were against top 8 opponents. And it was the first couple. So they beat Cronulla, New Zealand, and Canterbury. Of the next kind of 4 wins after that losing period was the Titans, the Sharks, the Warriors, and then Canterbury. Then they didn't beat another top 8 team until the very last round against Melbourne. So the doubt was still there about, okay, well, yeah, they're winning games and they're putting massive scores on, but who is it against? They're against teams that aren't making finals.
Yeah. Yeah, like I think I was also there. I also doubted them heading into the finals, and you saw some of the performances, and it just felt like they didn't have this dominant aura about them like Penrith do and Melbourne do. When they're in control of a game, you're like, it doesn't even matter if they're down by 2 or up by 2. You're like, they're going to win and they're going to follow through. It always felt like with the Broncos games going in there, it just felt like it could explode into their favor, or they could leak some points and this game would get close and they could lose it. I don't think you're ever watching their games and in that lead up really believed that they were in control, and maybe they were in a lot more control than what we thought, because they could certainly score points at will and Reece Walsh could turn on at will. And it was certainly during that period there where Adam Reynolds went down, Reece Walsh come in, and I'm trying to like the stats and the amount of try involvements that Reece Walsh had through that period when Reynolds was out was incredible. So you can see it right there on the screen. It's like the last 6 games, 6 tries himself, averaging 1.5 try assists, 4 line breaks. Like compared to those first 14 games of the season, it was just such a lift. He was matching the statistics in just a 6-game sample size there at the end. Like it was an incredible period for Reece Walsh, and we not even believing once you saw that heading into the finals that he was ready to take the big stage is you bite your tongue now, because it was like a complete misjudgment. And you can definitely say that we missed the beat there, because he was phenomenal and really lifted them. And it almost felt like coming into the grand final, you were even worried if what was going to happen when Reynolds come back. Was that going to You weren't certain that it was all about Reece Walsh and he was there and he's going to play that role.
Before we get more into him, I remember you did say something about the defense of the Broncos through this period, even though they were winning and they were still putting up, allowing points to good attacking teams. Now,
Yeah,
the overall average of 18.4 points to their opponents included games against bad attacking teams, teams like Newcastle, teams like Canterbury, that weren't scoring points, the Warriors. But against the good teams, they were allowing at least 22 points per game.
yeah. Well, good attacking teams. I'm pretty sure it was the Dolphins and the North Queensland Cowboys during that period. It was like a dogfight in those wins where it was all, I think they both teams put up around 30 points in both of those games. So that was also major.
Cronulla, the Dolphins, and North Queensland, 28 or 30 points in those 3 games.
Yeah. Yeah. So there was enough there to have you nervous about their defense against quality attacking sides. So I don't know, you feel like you plead your case that it was okay to be a little bit uncertain about Brisbane, because like I said, you were worried that these types of things were going to happen, or those defensive lapses were going to appear coming into the finals against top quality sides like Penrith, like Melbourne, like the Raiders. It was a worry there going into that first finals game. We'll go into those a little bit more, but it was like, okay, you're down, you're leaking points. That was the biggest concern. And then also with Reynolds sort of unsettling what Reece Walsh had built at the back end of that season.
So, just in terms of the playing group, so we spoke about it. Both Adam Reynolds, Ezra Mam, and Selwyn Cobbo go down in the same game. Um, Soft tissue injuries, looking like, hey, they're going to miss a chunk of time. But during this period, it's a maturation of Reece Walsh. And we've
Yeah.
spoken about it so much that he was given a new license. And I think by this time, he had proven his discipline to Michael Maguire to allow him to have that role. And it was also in a spot where I think Brisbane needed it. They had Ben Hunt and Billy Walters. And, Billy Walters should have a heap of credit for the way that this team progressed through those weeks without the star playmakers, because he played his role to a T. But it was all about Reece Walsh. And I was one of the biggest detractors of this guy through the second or
Mm.
the final third of the season, because I thought he was just trying too hard. And, especially in times of games where take an extra second and you can execute that. But he wasn't, and he was throwing wild forward passes or throwing the ball out of over the sideline, making bad decisions because he was trying to do everything himself. And those few times he did it stuck in my memory. But if you put it all together, Jez, you probably get the picture now of those small things in relation to all the things he did extremely well are like a very small percentage.
Yeah, but it is. It's the typical, I don't know, scenario where you remember the negatives, especially if you're on that train of, okay, you want to see those negatives, so they're the things you remember. But it's also sort of the way that he bounced back from those exact plays. And I think a lot of people have given him credit for it. Is just, okay, you made those mistakes, but you just went out and you still did your thing, and then obviously set up tries and or broke the line himself and learnt from that mistake, or that forced play. Instead of throwing the pass, ran himself, get a line break. So I think credit to him in those situations of being able to make those mistakes and then being the superstar after it. And I think that's always been the thing with Reece Walsh, is he could have very well gone into his shell after making those mistakes, and that's what he's done previously. Or he's continued to force the ball in those pressure situations, instead of maybe, okay, making the mistake, taking a breath after that set of six and going, all right, next time I'm going to do something different, instead of repeating himself again or going and hiding out the back.
Yeah. And we love a bit of super coach, you and I, and I'm on the site here, our NRL's super coach stats. The last 7 games of the season, 5 of those games, Reece Walsh had a minimum super coach score of 134 points for each of those five of those seven
Yeah,
games. So
yeah,
61 against Para, which they lost, 134 against South, 26 against Melbourne. They got done, I think it was 22-2 or something. 155 against the Dolphins, 147 against the Knights, 161 against North Queensland, 135 against Melbourne. The guy just continued to deliver when his team needed him. And
yeah,
I think that just gave, again, you look back in hindsight about how this season evolved for them, but the journey of Reece Walsh and knowing where it finished at the end of this season, this portion of the year was so important for him to test the waters, take on that burden in an area where, hey, the pressure was still on. That Brisbane weren't done and dusted. That top 8 was so tight, and there were teams that were playing
mm,
for their lives in the very last games of the season. Luckily, Brisbane had a couple of wins and they could secure a top 4 spot, but that was also probably necessary for them to get to a grand final. And so the pressure was still on, but it wasn't a cutthroat finals game where he was making those mistakes, but he was learning from them. And the build up for him in that maturity, in the way he took over the team when they needed him, it was just an amazing thing to look back on. And for this superstar that is still so young and so early in his career, you just hope it continues to develop and he can and reproduce some of that magic year on year.
Yeah, absolutely. Like this, like I said, like these are the years now that are going to determine what Reece Walsh is. Like if he goes on and breaks records, in 5, 6, 7 years time, it's going to be what happened this year and the growth and maturity that he developed, and then it's going to be what happens and how he backs up that back end of last season and what he does next year in 2026 and how he can then build and what level he gets to and the composure that he has. And then you sort of bring in also his time sort of coming into representative football, going away like to the Ashes, and then what he does for Queensland next year, and bringing all of that in, because now all of a sudden you've got your this guy that is at a whole nother level. And if he can continue to grow and develop and like the statistics, like you said, the Supercoach statistics are phenomenal.
Mm.
He was averaging a try a game that whole back end of the season. Like it's just, it's nuts what he did. And it's going to be fascinating to see if he can now back that up next year and live up to the hype and be the player I think now that everybody wants him to be. I think people like, I don't know, I feel like after that finals performance, I feel like I want him now personally to be more successful than maybe he did at the start of the year of this cowboy kid sitting in a commentary box, I think, with a cowboy hat on at one stage there. And you're like, who is this guy? But now I think everybody's behind him because of the maturity that he showed, and you want to see what his roof is and what he
Mm.
can achieve.
So on the eve of finals, the doubters again, probably one of the biggest ones here, even though they beat the Melbourne Storm, it's going to pull up the score here, 30 points to 14. Still doubting the Broncos because, Jerome Hughes broke his arm. They were without a halfback and the score ran away at the end. It was a little bit inflated. But the Broncos had built belief and they were right there on the cusp. And kind of to segue into this next segment, they had to kind of be reborn. And to do that, they'd have to survive 3 miracle comebacks in a row to create this legacy of the 2025 Brisbane Broncos. And I've written it here, an emotional crescendo, a finals trilogy worth the history books of the NRL.
Yeah.
We start off, Jez, in week 1. They have to go to Canberra to take on the Canberra Raiders, who wrapped up the minor premiership weeks before the end of the comp finished. They were flying high. They were structured. They were a great team. And the NRL was scared of the Canberra Raiders and what they'd achieved and what they could do. They're down 18-12 at halftime. Walsh and Carrigan then get sent to the sin bin. There's chaos in this game. What's your mindset, Jez, at halftime in this game in Canberra? Brisbane are down 18-12.
You think it's all over, don't you? Like, you think Brisbane are done, like in this game, obviously making the top 4, give them another life. But you pack that in. It's in Canberra. It's a final. Canberra have just proven all year, like proven everybody wrong and proven that they're able to win these tight games as well, because that's what they've done. They did it to they did it to Penrith. They did it earlier, like all year long. They were winning these 1-12 victories. That was the bet that we were running all season long, I think, was a Canberra 1-12 win, because they knew how to close out games. And everyone was like, oh, that luck's got to run out. But you were like, well, it doesn't. It's like, we thought that in probably round 15, and they did it, multiple times in the back end of the season as well. So it's just like, this game's over. And I think as Brisbane, I don't know, it would have been hard emotionally to go into that second half and go, okay, we've got this, we can win this game, because you were going up against the minor premiers and a team that's shown that they can close out in these situations where Brisbane maybe not so sure.
So the second half starts, and I think Canberra score first.
Yeah.
And then a bit of a fight erupts. Reece Walsh and Hudson Young get sent to the bin. It's 12 on 12. 3 minutes later,
Almost lucky there as well, because Hudson Young shouldn't have got sent there either. It was
no,
like a
probably not.
1 for 1, a 1 for 1.
Yeah.
Like, the easy call for the ref.
3 minutes later, Pat Carrigan also in the bin. So it's 12 on 11 for the Broncos. And I've heard multiple reports of what happened in the rooms. Reece Walsh, there's no service, there's no TVs in the room there. So Walsh can just hear the crowd reaction. And in walks Pat Carrigan. And he's like, "What the fuck are you doing here?"
Yeah.
And they're just like standing there, like, and then I'm pretty sure it was spoken about that Walsh said, "Let's get out there, let's win this game." Walsh returns and sparks a comeback, Jez, which will be in the NRL history books. When you look back in 10 years of greatest finals comebacks or greatest finals games,
Yeah.
they score. Uh, yeah, there's no point in extra time. So they score 16 points from the 65th minute. I think the minute Walsh comes back on the field, they score a try.
Yeah.
16 points. The game goes to Golden Point. Does it go? No, it doesn't go to Golden Point first. It goes to extra time first in finals.
Yeah.
5 minutes each way. And nothing happens. Both teams trade blows. We think, no, I'm missing again. Canberra almost win in regular time.
Canberra, yeah, score at the death.
Yeah. And
And
everybody's
then
cheering. Ricky Stewart's off the bench, and the bunker 3 minutes later intervenes.
Yeah.
There's a knock on, and it's a correct call. It's 100% correct call.
Yeah.
The game goes to extra time, and Canberra win it again. But they don't win it again. And still here, Brisbane, don't give up. They end up winning the fucking game 29 points to 28 off the back of Reece Walsh coming back and just taking over the game.
Yeah. Yeah. He just, like, it's crazy to think what's going through his head when he's sitting in the sin bin there, and Carrigan comes in and they're just like, okay, how's that composure? He must have just gone, all right, whatever, I'm going to make up for that mistake, and I'm going to come out and I'm going to turn this game on its head. And it's exactly what he did. And he just come out and blasted them, scored a try as soon as he got back on the field, set up the next couple, I believe. He was involved in both of those. Like, absolutely phenomenal. And then he kicks the penalty goal. They get a penalty right at the very, very death of full time, and he kicks the 2-point conversion, the penalty
to lock it up.
To lock it up. So, and it was like, I think it was off a block or attacking the kicker or something like that. But he still had to make that kick, and it wasn't
So he went for the field goal, which missed,
Yeah.
and they got his leg got taken out by by one of the players, and they had to kick it after getting injured on that play, then kick the goal to lock it up.
Yeah, exactly. So that's and then I think that whole try scenario was in Golden Point.
Right.
And then they come down the field straight after that and kick the field goal with Ben Hunt. So just insane. Like, what a wild ride it was. Like,
and the Ben Hunt resurgence there as well, just having the opportunity to repay Broncos fans after so many years of that since the drop ball.
And the drama wasn't done there moving into the second game against the Panthers either.
Mate, so I think they played 93 minutes in that first game. Canberra gets sent to week 2 of the finals, and they go out in straight sets. They're too fatigued to win the game against Cronulla, I think they played. But Brisbane get the week off, and then they meet the defending premiers, who have also been on just an astounding run from last on the ladder earlier in the season to a finals week 1 victory from from 7th, or I don't know where they finished.
8th even.
And then at half time, 14-0.
Yeah.
The Panthers are 98-0, I think the stat was, when leading
Mm.
by 14 or more points at half time. Walsh, again, the catalyst. 16-14. The Broncos come back against the defending premiers, 4-time defending premiers, with a 98-0 record in that situation. They don't allow the Panthers to score another point in the second half. They put 16 on. Their belief just outweighed the history books in this one, Jez.
Yeah, and it's like I think here, like we're obviously riding this Reece Walsh wave, but it felt like in that first half, Alamotti scores 2 tries. Felt like that right side, their left side defense, was in all sorts of trouble. It felt like whenever Penrith had that opportunity to attack the line, that left side was absolutely collapsing. And I don't think you can underestimate or the difference that they made and the adjustments that they had to make defensively also to hold Panthers to 0 points in the second half and adjust, because the Penrith had a lot of cracks at the line there. Like that second half, they had plenty of opportunity to score, and it just felt like when is the Brisbane line going to collapse? And that's exactly the way that Penrith plays, is they just take their opportunities, they be patient, they don't force anything, and eventually the defensive line will crack and they'll score a try or two and seal a game. Like Panthers played the game exactly how they wanted to play, but the Brisbane line didn't crack in the second half,
Yeah.
which opened the door and put more pressure then on their defensive line.
Yeah. And, the stats in the game, I was trying to find the second half stats to say more poignantly, but just in
Yeah.
the game, Panthers 3 line breaks to 1, 40 missed tackles, 47 missed tackles for the for the Panthers, 41 for Broncos. So like quite even there. But like quite even across the board. But you would imagine that the second half stats would have been heavily in the favor of the Broncos just in that resurgence. So they get through that game.
Yeah.
It's the monster effort where they put everything on the line. And even some people saying that that game was one of the best games of rugby league. The way those two teams just went at each other, and the Broncos come back to win against a defending champs. And maybe they're saying Brisbane have played their grand final already. Then they've got to go to the grand final
Twice.
in Sydney, travel and play the Melbourne Storm. Probably
Yeah.
the most consistent team of the last decade, even though they haven't won the grand finals. They've played in 11 of the last 12 prelim finals, I think. It was Craig Bellamy's 11th grand final. Like,
Yeah.
the team is just astounding. And now it's like Broncos won 10 of their last 12 into the finals. They had to come back from a monster effort against the Raiders, come back from a monster effort against the Panthers. What can they possibly do in this grand final? But again, started out just in atrocious form. But the
Yeah.
support the team received in Sydney, you could hear it through the TV, just the amount of Broncos supporters at the ground.
Yeah. I think like watching it on TV, I don't think I've ever been able to hear a, a crowd like you heard there. I think like the atmosphere there must have been just something completely like out of this world, because to hear the sounds that were coming through the TV, imagine what it would have been like at the ground, and the support for Brisbane was just nuts. Like, and we felt it even, working this online game, the amount of support behind Brisbane through this whole finals period has just been crazy. I've never been grilled so much by backing against any team in any sport than you were online. The online hate you received like was just nuts, and it showed there, and it's exactly what they needed, because they had to once again dig themselves out of a 10-point hole Like
Mm.
22-12 at halftime
Yeah.
again. Like,
So they scored first, which was like we said Melbourne will score first, and we thought Melbourne were
mm,
going to win the game. Dean Mariner
yeah,
crosses for the quickest try ever in an NRL grand final
yeah.
after 2 minutes. Melbourne
Almost
hit
runs it
back
out of the back.
just as quick in the 7th minute,
Yeah,
and then again in the 13th minute, again in the 21st minute before Reece Walsh
yeah,
crosses for his try in the 30th to kind of rope back a little bit of momentum. But to your point, Jez, it's 22-12 at half
mm,
time. The Broncos go into the dressing rooms with, a few question marks around their edge defense and around whether they can stop Jerome Hughes, whether
yeah.
they can their edges are able to do anything. They look just in a quagmire. Like it was not looking great.
No, not at all. Like you were thinking, okay, how much is this is gonna blow out? The pick here was the 13 plus because it was just gonna. There was no way you could have looked at that at halftime and gone, Brisbane are going to come back from this. Like Bellamy, the dynasty of Bellamy and everything built on discipline and defense and being able to close out games and Brisbane, you're like, there's no way they come back again from this type of halftime deficit and like be able to get up again against now. Like, yes, you do it to Penrith, like that's also phenomenal, but there's no
Mm.
way you do it to Penrith and Melbourne in the same final series. Like,
Yeah.
unheard of, like impossible.
And we've had a thing that we've followed all season where if a team is
I was
going
wondering if
down
you're going to bring this up.
is down at halftime but their possession rate is 40% or lower, then you can almost
Mm,
predict, okay, well, there's going to be a way they're going to even out because on average, possession in a game of rugby league across all the years, it's pretty even. So if a team
yeah,
has a mountain of possession in the first half, it's likely that they're going to get it, or it's going to even out in the second half.
mm,
But the Broncos had 46% of possession in the first half, 35% of territory. So Melbourne were really pushing them hard.
mm, mm,
Um, and to your point, it's just like where do they find the momentum? Fast forward again, Reece Walsh steps up to the plate, 56% possession, 57% territory. They run 200 more meters than Melbourne do in the second half. 33 tackle busts. And we spoke about it. We were messaging or we were watching the game. Just Melbourne unable to make a tackle. They just falling off the
mm.
tackles on Shibasaki, falling off tackles on Walsh. And the Broncos had 5 line breaks in the second half, Jez.
Yeah. And I think the one thing that's sort of forgetting even to bring up here, lose Reynolds, lose Ben Hunt.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, like
But
your
wasn't that the
back is
recipe?
a yeah, yeah. Well, it was the recipe that almost turned around their season, losing Ezra Mam and Adam Reynolds, and up steps the superstar Reece Walsh and closes out the game and wins it for these guys. And like I think he even said, like he told them he was going to win this game. He like the self belief in him, and I think even being able to do that, like we're like, fuck, there's no way they do it again. But I think having that belief that they've just done it against the Penrith Panthers is like, well, why can't we do it against the Melbourne Storm in the
Yeah,
grand final on the big stage? Like, just like insane to be able to come out of that and put on that performance and Reece Walsh to step up. And that's why we're having this conversation and this big Reece Walsh, I don't know, love explosion is because it's an incredible performance from an individual player. And yes, of course, there's so many players on the Brisbane Broncos team that deserve to be put up on a pedestal just like Walsh is. But like this is something we're seeing something that was just that is generational, that you don't see a finals performance one by a team but also by a certain individual that has
mm,
just turned 3 finals games around in a row and been able to do that. Like it might be something that's going to tell your grandkids about because it is like
yeah,
it is. I think something it's going to be that moment when we're 80 years old and we're talking about old footy stories and our old job of covering the NRL, and it's like this is what you're going to chat about. Probably this could be
Yeah.
the moment, the final series of our lives.
So Reece Walsh then took out, obviously, the Clive Churchill medal as the best player on the ground in the grand final. Michael Maguire's strategy and structure of how he approached this Brisbane team is vindicated. The highs and lows of the season, the roller coaster, all kind of, to the point of outlasting their opponents in the
Mm.
three most important games of their season. The second half, where they outscored their opponents. What did we count? Like 50 points to 12 or something, like
Yeah, it
outrageous.
was like just under 50 points to 10, I believe, in their three final second halves. It was like 45 or 48 or something like.
And the maturity, the journey of Reece Walsh through this season to then stamp his name in the record books as a premiership player, a Clive Churchill medalist, and a proper superstar of the
Mm.
game.
Stop it.
Just kind
Giving me
of,
goosebumps.
it's an amazing story. And exactly why we're sitting talking about it now is because it's just an all-time season from the Brisbane Broncos in terms of being a footy fan and watching the journey, counting them out. But they're one of the biggest and best clubs of the rugby league landscape in the whole world, and they're
Mm.
down and out. They're down in 11th spot. They have
Yeah.
a points differential of 14 points, which they
Yeah.
turn around to 172 at the last game
Yeah.
of the
Like
season, second
like
best.
we talk about the three comebacks they did, but it's four because of the comeback they did throughout the season. They were
Yeah,
done.
yeah.
Like,
And Maguire just proves that with the discipline and the structure, his coaching style, with a team that wants to do it and that can handle it, he will build a champion team. And we've seen it now with the Rabbitohs, we've seen it with New South Wales, we've seen it with the Kiwis, and now we've seen it with Brisbane. And Jez, my question to you to kind of wrap this up, are we going to see the start of a new dynasty in the NRL with the Brisbane Broncos? Or is this season a perfect storm of all of these things just happening together, which finished with this amazing finish with the Broncos? What are you feeling?
my short answer is they're going to be there. If Reece Walsh is the player that he's become and he carries that into next year, I think we're going to see them have another crack at it. They're going to obviously have to go through a period when Adam Reynolds moves on, and adjust to that. And obviously bringing in a new half can change things. Also Ben Hunt, so they're going to lose a little bit of experience, and it's sort of what happens in that period to maybe how long. No, you're not going to say a dynasty, but a period where they are premiership contenders for the next, say, 3 or 4 years. I think that is going to be their biggest challenge. But I don't see a team that Reece Walsh plays on that's not going to be a contender for the premiership.
Well, what a year for the Brisbane Broncos. And I think we can say this story was never about talent. It was about the transformation of a team of players into a superstar team. And they wrapped it up with a grand final victory, another feather in the cap for the Brisbane Broncos. And what a ride the 2025 NRL season was, Jez. Already looking forward to next year.
Yeah, insane. I don't know. I don't know how many times I actually got goosebumps through this when we were talking about it. You got a little bit Gus Gooley there with some of your inspiring speeches about how it was, but I think that's exactly, it's been an inspiring story, an underdog story, comeback story. Like it's got all the pieces and ingredients for a Netflix series or a Netflix film, doesn't it? Like
Yeah.
one of these or the new Disney
Yeah.
Remember the Titans type thing of Madge coming in, doesn't it? It
Yeah.
could just be that could be it.
Hope there was a film
Maybe
crew
that's
there
where we
following.
are in our video editing and filming careers in 20 years' time when we look back and go, this is the moment. Let's pitch an idea to Disney.
Yeah.
Brisbane Broncos, mate.
All
Australian Rugby
right. Well,
League.
There'll be a heap of rugby league content on Ahead of the Game and bets.com.au for the Pack Champs and the Rugby League Ashes. So stick around for that. Let us know in the comments as well if you've made it this far and your reflection on the Brisbane season and whether you think they'll be back for 2026 in the
The
same
greatest
way.
moment, maybe. What was the greatest moment in all of its greatness?
Send us home, buddy.
All right. Well, hang with us and stay ahead of the game.
Just like the Brisbane Broncos.
Yeah.